Welcome to Moral Side of the News. No, you're not mistaken. I'm not John Blim. I'm Shawn Kaelin with the WHAS Crusade for Children. And if you've ever wondered if God has a sense of humor, look at me in this chair right now. I have no idea how I got here, but I'm excited to be the host for Moral Side of the News. Joining me today is a panel, distinguished panel, as John would say. Rabbi Stan Miles with the Louisville Melton School, Reverend Clay Calloway, West Louisville Ministers Coalition, and Father Bill Hammer, St. Margaret Mary and St. William Catholic Churches. Our first topic today, November 30th, 2021, Ethan Crumbley opened fire at Oxford High School in Michigan, killing 4 of his classmates and wounding 7 others. This past Tuesday, his mother, Jennifer Crumbley, became the first parent in the United States to be found guilty of involuntary manslaughter for a mass shooting committed by her teenage son. Panel, I turn to you. Obviously, the gun debate is alive and strong, but does this verdict, holding parents accountable, give you hope in preventing these horrible school shootings from continuing?
I think that's a natural progression. The parents, the person who perpetrated the crime is a minor. He's not an adult. Somebody has to be responsible, and it's the parents. It's their responsibility, especially in this case, because the young man had some mental health issues that they knew about, that they were monitoring. And if a person has mental health issues, it makes no sense whatsoever to make firearms available to them because of the ability they would have not only to hurt others, but to hurt themselves. Makes all the sense in the world, and I understand in March the father is going to go on trial as well for the same trial, for the same crime.
Well, I think it's a baby step in the right direction, and I say that because it's all the questions that are being raised in this incident. It exposes just how bizarre the gun debate has been in the United States, and how insane and how unregulated it's been. Here you have a minor who is 15 years old, was given access or given a gun at 15 by his parents. And you can't even, he wasn't old enough to get a driver's permit. And yet you're going to allow this child have access to a firearm. So it's just, it's exposing a lot of the contradictions in our, in the lack of regulation for firearms, and especially in this case. It should be a precedent, because with rights comes responsibility. The whole thing that's missing link in this whole gun debate is the responsibility piece. You can't have the right without a responsibility. So at least it gives responsibility to the ones who was held accountable, because the parent was the one who purchased the firearm, but the child couldn't purchase a firearm. You couldn't go up to the counter and buy that. Mm-hmm. So in fact, that's illegal in most states, to buy a firearm and give it to somebody else. So not only with it being a child, but being another human being, you purchase a firearm to give it to somebody else who is not responsible enough to operate that firearm. So it just exposes so much. So it's a baby step in the right direction. It just what took place 2-3 years ago up in Kenosha, Wisconsin, with another case where a minor had access to a high-powered firearm and went from Illinois to Wisconsin and was walking in the street in plain sight and killed 2 protesters up there in Kenosha. Kyle Rittenhouse, I think his name was. And he was dismissed. His mother was never brought into question, never had to be arrested or receive any responsible, accountability for that. But again, it's another case where the child could not buy the gun, but the firearm was purchased by the parent, and the parent gave him not only the gun, but go across straight lines and use the gun. So I think it's a baby step in the right direction. We have just been walking down a very insane path in America with guns. And I'm hopeful that this might begin the debate and the road down that needs to be pursued to establish responsibility and accountability for firearm regulation by those who purchase arms and give it to someone who's irresponsible in the use.
I think you kind of frame the question, we hope it's going to make a difference. I hope it does provoke some discussion. I'm not sure short term it's going to make much a difference until we have more public debate in this area. Because there are certain parts and areas of our culture that, thinking about some of the rural farming communities, I know I've heard people tell stories, that as a little kid we were taught, how to shoot and, might be protecting animals on the farm or whatever it might be. And similarly, sometimes you're a minor and you're driving a vehicle. So or it doesn't make it right or legal, but it does happen in certain cultures. But one of the things that I think is very important in this step, it's to me a very logical step in the way we have been for a number of years holding other people accountable for some people's actions. For instance, that we now hold bartenders liable.
Yeah, good example.
If you knowingly sell, alcohol to someone who is inebriated, and then that person walks out of your bar, you're responsible for that. And similarly, if you purchase that and then start handing off to your buddies, then what we would say is your actions can be held accountable, even though you're not the perpetrator of whatever the crime is that happened or something like that along the line. So, and there's some other examples in our culture as well that if you enable someone, then you should be held accountable for that. And that's what I think sometimes is going on in our culture now. We put certain values on the right to arms, that we don't look forward down the line to how we hold other people accountable for those kind of choices that they're making. And so I do think it's a step forward, and it might cause some parents, to make sure that they are keeping the guns locked up in a different way, that they don't have their kids regular access to guns lying around the house. And again, we all have horror stories here in Louisville, again, where a small little child goes in their parents' room and just starts playing with a gun and accidentally shoots a sibling or accidentally shoots somebody. And at this point, usually the parents aren't held accountable for that, but maybe just started changing that as well. We'll see. But,
Good discussion, and it will surely continue to be talked about. And let's move on to topic number 2, and moving up to Washington, D.C., and the battle for border security. This week saw intense debate inside the GOP, with some calling for Senator Mitch McConnell to step down as Republicans submarine a bill that some say would have amounted to the most conservative immigration bill backed by a Democratic president in a generation. Panel, is election year politics putting our country in danger, and how do you see this playing out from here?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this what's
Absolutely,
taking place
yes.
up there. It's insane, and the Republican Party has just imploded. They're fighting. They're creating kind of a congressional cannibalism. They're starting to feed on themselves. Here, this is a bill that they had championed and crafted, and because of some ideological, foothold, they want to make a point. They're actually imploding and challenging the leadership, going after McConnell. He's been a darling of the party for years. Now he has suddenly found himself out of step with the Republican Party. And this particular episode is, in my view, is fueled by Donald Trump, of all people, who expressed some opposition to it. So here they're taking a cue from someone like Donald Trump, who lacks wisdom in all things, and yet you're going to let him set the tone and give the cue as to what direction you're going to be voting in Congress. He's not even in elected office, but still, it just exposes just how bizarre the politics has gotten. How kind of a a demented kind of a state of politics where they're feeding on themselves and can't get anything done because of the infighting.
Yes, as I was saying, the main reason behind the scenes is that President Trump, who supported all this all along, wants to keep it an election issue. So that's why it's not voting on what's good for the country, it's voting on what's good for my future election potential. So you can keep saying, they don't take care of the border, they don't take care of the borders. And so they originally, and this is very publicly said, we will support it if, we tie it to these other things, and so we tie it to the other things like support for Israel, support for Ukraine, and then, no, we're not going to do it because it's not good for our upcoming election. President Trump, the candidate, a former president, can't have that as an election issue. And now it's going to be taken back out again, just as a standalone, which is what they now are demanding. And I think it's pretty safe to say it's not going to happen. But my understanding of anybody called to serve and be elected is to put the country's needs first. That was Civics 101, I thought.
Do they still teach civics 101?
They just don't take governance seriously. And that's the tragedy. They don't take governance seriously, so things are at a standstill, people's lives are in flux or in danger, and it's like being back on television with The Apprentice. It's all about the ratings. Well, this is more serious than the ratings. This is a safety issue. It is a life or death issue, and they're just playing games.
Well, it appears that the Republican Party, at least in the recent memory, has not been concerned about governance. They're more concerned about grievance. So grievance is driving everything they do, regardless of the consequences, regardless of the impact on actually governing the country. So governing is not a priority. It appears that grievance and politics is driving everything. And the downward spiral of this candidate that they picked as a likely candidate is not only going down, but he's pulling everybody down with him. So it is what it is. It's a natural progression of the gravity of their ideology that is just making them turn on themselves and create a kind of a congressional cannibalism. It's turning, and there's no wisdom in it. No rhyme in it, other than the hope of electing someone that's going to advance their ideology, even to the point where they're discounting their traditional leadership that doesn't exist anymore, to call them a conservative party. You can't even say that anymore because they've vacated all of the traditional values ascribed to conservatism.
Well, it seems to me, too, that, again, trying to find ways to find analogies to this, would be like a local ministerial association, and they come with an idea to maybe help a group of people in that local community, but it's going to be based at another church. And so, well, I can't support that because it's going to make that church look better than my church, or my congregation better than that other congregation. Or even to say, well, I can't support the Crusade for Children now because that hospital may get it, but I want my hospital to get it. And so it's like finding what's the common good, what's the good for the nation, what's good for everybody, and not being willing to say, okay, if somebody else is able to benefit from that, just because I'm not going to politically, but if it's good for the country, we got to do what's right. And that's, again, what I remember studying, what government was all about, and we've got set up the way we were set up. We weren't worried about individuals getting ahead. We were worried about the good of the majority getting ahead. So.
Working for the common good is so far off the back burner that it's nowhere near the stove.
Yeah.
Well, I've often mentioned that there's a difference between a politician and a statesman. Statesman is concerned about the next generation. Politician is concerned about the next election. So they don't see past, the next election cycle. They're always in perpetual election mode, never in a position of governing and trying to make decisions for the good of the country. So that appears to be where we are, and that's where it is. So it's, and God, as the Bible says, is not the author of confusion. So perpetual confusion is chaos, and it's to use the term party, it's kind of odd because they're anything but celebrating any idea that, well, it's just a downward spiral of chaos. And
I did find that's a good, I don't know, distinction I've heard. I mean, I've heard like that, but I did, between a politician and states, a member, statesman, that type of thing. That, only worry about the next election, because that is exactly what they've said. We're not supporting this because of the upcoming election.
They said
They said it.
They said it, yep.
Yeah.
they
That's what they
said the loud part, the first part, the private part out loud, as it's said. So they said it out loud, so you know what they're saying.
As recently as November, they came out and said,
And then
this is what we want.
Mitch McConnell should know that too. He stopped President Obama from appointing someone that he had the right to support someone to the Supreme Court. He said because of the election cycle, that we're going to block his duty to appoint a Supreme Court justice. So he made it clear that because of politics and the election cycle, he's decided not to promote and to support someone at least being considered for the Supreme Court. So what goes around comes around. It's happening to Mitch McConnell, and it couldn't happen to a better guy, a nicer guy. So he's kind of caught in the crosshairs of his own ideology that's come back around to debate him.
There's a lot of irony here that I think that Senator McConnell is dealing with, and it's probably very painful for him.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the topic of term limits will come up on a future moral side, because that might solve a lot of these issues.
That would help.
Okay, we have we're about 10 minutes left, I think, on this additional moral side. Let's go move on to topic number 3. Humana announced this Monday that it's relocating its headquarters and closing its iconic downtown Humana Building. The next day, Fifth Third Bank announced it was relocating its operations out of its downtown location in the Brown and Williamson Tower. Panel, I propose to you, what does this mean for the future of downtown Louisville?
They make decisions. These are two iconic buildings, believe it or not, in the Louisville skyline. I remember when the Humana Building was built, it won all kind of design awards, national design awards when it was built. It hadn't been that long ago. It hadn't been, but
40 years.
it hadn't been 40.
About 40 years.
Yeah, no more than 40. But and then the downtown Fifth Third building, which was one of the used to be the smaller version of the World Trade Center, the two iconic buildings. That's the only thing that's left now. So they're moving out. So it's a business decision. Brown and Williamson moved out years ago from that tower downtown. And people make decisions all the time, based on what's in the best interest of their business model. And so we get a lot of pride in skyscrapers. It looks good coming into this downtown city. I understand that Humana is kind of complaining now that there's some design flaws in the building. I don't know if that has anything to do with the decision or not, but things happen. Things happen all the time. And these iconic buildings in Louisville, a lot of this started happening even before 2020. COVID had something to do with it, but that was going to build a big high-rise downtown skyscraper that was artistic building right on the corner of, I think, Fifth Street. It was a very innovative design, but because of the market trend, they decided not to build that, very progressive, innovative design of a skyscraper downtown. So, a business in business to make money. And if it doesn't fit the business model, hey.
If memory serves me, that building that they were talking about building was to be 60 stories or so.
It was.
And the Humana Building, iconic, that's a good word for it. It's magnificent and it's unusual. Something has to happen to repurpose both of those properties. I think it would be easier to repurpose the Humana Building because of its unique nature than the Fifth Third building that looks like every other mid-century office tower built in every other city. This is probably very quixotic of me. Okay. We're talking, we've got a curse of homelessness. And we have a pressing need for affordable housing. Like I said, it's probably very quixotic of me, but that space, a space like the Fifth Third Building and or the Humana Building, if it is properly utilized and supervised, could solve the housing crisis in Louisville, Kentucky. I don't know.
Well, you know, it's the Humana Building is across the street from the Center for the Arts. So the Center for Arts tends to be a highbrow destination where people dress up and put on, you know, putting on the Ritz. So you know, the contrast of the building across the street housing the homeless, you know, that could fly in the face of the arrogant and the high and the rich and the famous that tend to frequent the Center for the Arts. So it's a good idea. I mean, I'm sure the homeless would appreciate that option. Staying at the Humana Building is a whole lot easier than sleeping on a viaduct downtown. So it's going to create some opportunities for imagination and progressive thinking. I don't think the city has had the reputation of much progressive thinking, but it could be an opportunity to do just that now and repurpose a building for better use.
Well, part of my initial reaction too is we've got this space. We have already been creatively using some of the downtown spaces, creating them into apartments, even some condos,
Hotels,
things like that, trying to find ways to repurpose those spaces. Now, again, we have a huge tower in this case, and what that might be could be certainly some housing. But I think also what they're going to be what we're going to be struggling with as a community is also the ripple effect. It is going to impact restaurants. It is going to impact. They've already been struggling the same because of all this work at home people, which is one of the rationales Humana is using. More and more people are working at home, and but we're also in a time where restaurants are struggling anyway because of the takeout and you know. The home delivery service of the food. You don't need a restaurant anymore. All you need is a kitchen, a public kitchen. And so the continuing kind of ripple effect. But what this will impact is, again, tax revenue.
Ooh, yeah.
It's going to be a major impact on the city's income with both of these offices closing. And that will affect all kinds of resources, human services. It will impact things like the police budget. It's going to impact, you know, a lot of things like the fire department budget. It will continuing to, and everybody wants taxes lower. Fair enough. Who doesn't? But then where certain services rely on, and it's effective when you don't have a solid tax base anymore. So how we use these spaces, there are entrepreneurs out there who will do well, I'm sure. But looking at some of the other you know, kind of big, huge towers they're planning on building, like, for instance, the one we talked about, like Lexington Road and Bridgestead and all that up there. Housing, mixed use. One of that entrepreneur now would have been doing that if they had known there were going to be big, huge buildings downtown. And
Good point.
so we'll see how it continues to play itself out. But the impact initial, I think, of the closing of the office spaces is going to be felt, but the ripple effect is going to be even larger. And that's something that won't be known until a year or two or three down the road.
It's a good point about the impact on taxation and the ability to, you know, to do services. We don't realize how taxing and the whole process of taxing impacts so much in a city.
Yes.
We forget that when Mary and Joseph came to Bethlehem, it was a tax-related mandate that forced them to come back to Bethlehem. So taxation is a very vital part of the ability to govern and provide vital services. So when you start removing property out that you can't put it back on the tax rolls, that's always a cause of great concern.
Another thought just came to me too, related somewhat to this, but building on it, is that talking about even low-income housing or things like that, but proper supervision, proper care. And there's been a big, huge story, again, about the local housing authority care for low-income property under their direction right now, and to bring more under their umbrella.
Right.
You know, in the news has been like things like Dosker Manor, places like
Right.
that.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that it's hard sometimes for the city to even supervise the ones or the areas that they're directly responsible for, not to mention supervising the other properties downtown that are owned by other people but fall under making sure codes are being enforced, making sure that people are being treated fairly, you know, in their rentals and things like that, or whatever that related to that might be. But it's got a long-term ripple effect, and we'll see.
I wonder if we have the workforce that would be able to supervise
Yes.
those issues.
Yeah. That's been an ongoing question, certainly, within the present administration, and going back earlier, but it's come to more of a forefront.
But, you know, even Humana, they moved their offices down to the old Belknap. Belknap was a major corporate player in Louisville.
Yes.
They were, at one time, which I worked at a summer job, they were one of the largest, they were the largest hardware wholesaler in the world.
Yes.
So Humana moved into like a fish moved into a shell on a seashore. They went and repurposed the Belknap building. So they themselves have been recipients of repurposing a building that was used for something else, and they moved in and done quite well down on the waterfront. So you know, but they made that move down there. You know, it made a lot of sense. You know, and it's still functioning from what I gather to this day in a very, very practical way. That's moving. Seems like the move is moving in that direction, more in the Hulu direction now than in the heart of downtown. So, for Humana, this is yet another iteration in their design to expand and thrive.
And in your sense, Clay, the glass isn't half empty, it's half full. The glass would be more than half empty if, God forbid, Fifth Third Bank and God forbid Humana saying, we're going to pull up stakes from Louisville.
Right.
They're not saying that. They're saying, we're going to reposition Humana to their waterfront property and the Fifth Third Bank to building yet another building in the middle of Nulu.
Yeah. Thank you, panel. It's a great discussion. It's going to continue. Obviously, there's more, like the Courier Journal building has moved away from us. Even in the block surrounding the station, there's been quite a few vacancies of recent. Thank you to our panel today, as always. Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School, Reverend Clay Calloway, West Louisville Ministers Coalition, and Father Bill Hammer, St. Margaret Mary and St. William Catholic Churches. Thanks for watching and listening to Moral Side of the News. We'll have an all-new conversation next week, and if you want to catch us on YouTube or you just missed John Blim, check us out on YouTube and search for some of his past shows. Have a good weekend. Good Super Bowl Sunday, everyone.
All right. Good job, Shawn.